Grounded water bombers or necessary safety precautions. Once again this week, the wildfire response turned political in the province. It even included allegations of trespassing. The Premier of Saskatchewan and Alberta held two events together this week, and Cole is here to stay for a while longer to break all of this down. We're once again joined by our political panel, political columnist Murray Mandryk and Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature for the Canadian Press. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Good morning, Murray.
Good morning.
And Jeremy, the water bombers sitting on the tarmac, not being used to fight fires, is the allegation the NDP made this week. What's the latest on this?
Yeah, so NDP leader Carla Beck came up with some flight data to reveal, yes, like you mentioned, the new water bomber Saskatchewan received in late May was grounded at the La Ronge airport. And she also revealed 4 planes of the province's existing fleet of 10 aircraft were also not used. So we're talking about nearly half of the aircraft not flying during the worst of the wildfire fight. Now, Beck says it's unacceptable to have water bombers sitting idle, and the government needs to do a better job of planning in ahead of time so that we could have all planes running when we're fighting these fires. Now, the SPSA confirmed that these planes had been grounded for various reasons. So for the old planes, it was due to repairs, inspections, there was a lack of parts, although one of the planes is expected to come up later this month. And there's also been a shortage of experienced maintenance engineers to get these planes in ship shape. And so that's why they were grounded. Now, for this new plane, the reason why that one wasn't used was we had no trained pilots for that one specifically. Pilots were doing training on a simulator before the plane. The plane came, but then the fires were happening. So they had to change course and do that instead of do training. Marlo Pritchard, he's the head of the SPSA. He was asked, did you have everything that you needed? And he said, yes, we did, even without these planes. We brought in planes from Quebec, British Columbia, and Alaska, so they used that. They said this wasn't some kind of secret thing. Planes always need maintenance, and you just can't fast-track safety. Now, you mentioned this allegation of trespassing from the opposition NDP at the La Ronge Air Base. I think some media outlets got some word that it was the NDP on the tarmac. The SPSA later confirmed it wasn't the NDP on the tarmac. And so the NDP was pretty upset about that and said, we're not disrupting anything. We're just shooting a video outside.
Yeah, they were there, but it wasn't the people, the SPSA had put an initial release out saying don't trespass. Murray, what do you make of all this? We've been talking wildfire response and how this has become political, and this is definitely the way it turned this week.
Well, how do you unpack this? I'll start with the less significant and the whole notion of the politics back and forth between the government, and it was the government basically accusing the NDP of playing politics, which they did publicly, and basically suggesting that they were somehow interfering in this way or whispering in the ears of reporters that they were doing so, which is tacky and everything else, but it's the way things get done in politics. NDP have played a bit of politics on other issues, specifically why didn't they bring in the Army, because that's a sentiment that the Army is going to come in and solve the problems. No, it's probably going to be solved by people trained to fight fires in a more direct way than the Army is. That's just a simple reality. However, there are legit complaints that the NDP are making. One of those legit complaints seems to be the notion of why was this water bomber arriving in May? Why was there not proper training done in advance? And specific to the fleet itself, and why was so much of it grounded? The government's complaints are probably legit in terms of getting people to maintain the aircraft, getting the proper training for a specific aircraft. Safety obviously is a priority. All these things have to be taken into consideration. So does the fact that this government thought it was going to be a light forest fire season and that they would be able to get a jump on this. Somebody obviously made decisions in terms of management here that require some scrutiny and perhaps even some level of accountability given the damage done by these fires right now, and perhaps how we were unready for certain aspects. Now, in terms of the unready part, they got planes from elsewhere and they weren't left short. So that has to be taken into consideration. But someplace along the line, we need an effective assessment as to whether the Saskatchewan government has the resources at the ready, because fire seasons are starting much earlier than they used to. They're starting in March and April, well, April anyway, at least in the north, in terms of issues that we have to deal with. And that's probably requiring more change than the government is prepared to commit to, because change is cost. Let's go back to a budget where they didn't have a contingency fund for forest fires, for tariffs, for anything else, for crop insurance. There are a whole bunch of issues that the government chose as choices that they weren't going to invest in a lot of ways. And I think there is a significant amount of accountability at that level. As I say, there's a lot of complexity. I hope that helps unpack it a bit.
Yeah, it's complex, and you talk about the response and things happening earlier, and we've asked those questions. I know the three of us in news conferences and budget stuff about not planning or maybe not putting the money aside for those things. Switching gears here, Jeremy, Premier Moe was in Alberta this week, spending time with Danielle Smith, first in Calgary, then in Lloydminster. What was the focus of these events?
Yeah, so they both came together again to promote their ambitions of growing oil and gas in both provinces. There's a big family photo of both of them together. 80 or so people in Lloydminster. Anyways, yeah, so again, promoting this idea of an energy corridor in Western Canada, shipping oil and gas and other resources to northwestern British Columbia and then up to Churchill, Manitoba through the Hudson Bay. Also calling on, again, this federal government to ban some energy and environmental regulations, the Impact Assessment Act, clean electricity regulations, proposed emissions caps. Now, Moe says even though this is what he wants, he likes this idea from Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada becoming an energy superpower. He admitted this goes against his political stripe in a way. He hasn't always been a fan of Trudeau, but this is something he can get behind.
Yeah, we'll see later today with what comes of the bills that are before Parliament in that sense. And Murray, is this a sign to you that a relationship between the provinces is becoming cozy? We know that Premier Moe and former Premier Jason Kenney held a lot of these events in the past, and they had a lot of photo ops. We haven't seen the same amount with Premier Smith and Moe. Is this a changing of the relationship in your mind?
Not really. I like maybe the outcome better than the process. I don't think it's a helpful process to have Alberta's cabinet and our cabinet, who are like-minded politically, get together and relive every grievance they've had with Justin Trudeau. And I assume there was probably a lot of that going on behind those closed doors of those nice family photos that Jeremy was talking about. It just seems natural that would be the course. There are legit grievances, by the way, and let's not underplay the importance of dealing with those. I like the fact that Premier Scott Moe is coming out and saying, well, I see a path now. I see this notion of energy superpowers, of becoming an energy superpower, of basically looking at projects in a different way than maybe Justin Trudeau did when he had Guilbeault as his environment minister. There are positive signs. I don't think I particularly appreciate us adopting the Alberta viewpoint on a fair number of issues, not the least of which is tied to sort of the whole separation question that may or may not be a bigger issue right now in Alberta than it is here, by the way. It seems to be a growing sentiment here. And one of the reasons it's a growing sentiment is because Scott Moe has not distinguished himself enough from the Alberta position and the Danielle Smith position. Are they personally close in the same way that I think Scott Moe really admired Jason Kenney, who does not like Danielle Smith? Starting to sound like a bit of a conservative soap opera, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it is. But maybe not, but I think the more important question is how do you move forward to a productive relationship with the federal government? I don't know if tying yourself to Alberta right now is the best path. Maybe it is in terms of moving forward on some of the legit grievances, but I think Scott Moe has to be careful here. And I think he has to be careful not only politically speaking, but for the sake of this province.
And Jeremy, this has been something that we've talked about, I know, and it's come up. But again, this week we had the Minister of Crown Investments, Jeremy Harrison, reaffirm, I guess, the commitment to the plan to burn coal into the future, indeterminately. What's the latest on this?
Yeah, for sure. So we got this letter from Minister Harrison to Sask Power employees this week saying the province will extend the lifespan of the 3 coal-fired plants we have in southeast Saskatchewan. So the government's been indicating this for about a year now, but this is kind of more of a formal policy direction, I think, that they're sending through this letter. Harrison says it'll maintain jobs in the area, it'll meet a growing electricity demand and keep rates affordable. We don't have any details about the costs of upgrading these facilities or refurbishing them. We don't even have timelines in terms of how long they want to extend this by. But Harrison is saying, maybe we'll look at adding more carbon capture units, but again, we had those issues at the Boundary Dam with that carbon capture. So we'll see where it goes. The plan here is to have these coal plants extended until Saskatchewan moves to nuclear energy sometime in the mid-2030s. The province is studying the Estevan area to do that, look at a new small modular reactor there. And Harrison is arguing the province has constitutional jurisdiction to do all this. He says Saskatchewan can control its electricity regulation. There's a phase-out timeline by 2030 for provinces to phase out coal, and Saskatchewan signed a deal with Ottawa in 2019 to have some plants go beyond that 2030 phase-out. So again, we'll see what happens. The Supreme Court of Canada, there was a ruling that said Ottawa has jurisdiction over carbon pollution, so we might see some differences of opinion there, and the federal government has not yet responded to Saskatchewan's move here either.
Jeremy, thank you. Thanks, Murray.
You're very welcome.
That's Murray Mandryk, a political columnist. Jeremy Symes covers the legislature in Saskatchewan for the Canadian Press. If you have thoughts on what our panel had to say, you can always weigh in. Morning edition at cbc.ca or call us on Talkback, 1-800-661-7540.